YouTube. Hey folks, welcome to Atonuv Open Studio. This is episode 8.5 because my internet decided not to work last night. The format is the same tonight as it is every night. You can send tracks to atonuvrecords@gmail.com. I'll take a look at them. We'll see what's going on in your mix, see if there's anything to tighten up. You can send final mixes, final masters, demos, rough mixes, ideas. You can ask questions in the chat. I'll see what we can talk about in any question that comes up. The other thing you can do is if there is a popular song and you're kind of wondering what's going on in that mix and you want me to take a look at it. Okay, had it drop out, but I think that was just a server error this time, so I think we're in the clear. I'll be keeping an eye on that. Not sure why my ISP is doing me like this. So, this is Atonuv Open Studio. I know I've got David has sent in a couple of tracks, and I'm going to get to those as soon as people start to get in on the chat and get in here. Hey folks, I'm going to just write some stuff down in the YouTube chat while we're getting started. I'm looking healthy. I'm in the green. So, at any time, feel free to send something to atonuvrecords@gmail.com. And if you are in the chat and want your track looked at any point, go ahead, just pop a message in the chat. We'll get to you right away. So on and so forth. I'm just keeping an eye on this data transfer because the internet was not cooperating yesterday. All right, while we are kind of getting started and waiting, I'm just going to play a little bit of background music. Hey folks, welcome to Atonuv Open Studio. If you are just joining in on YouTube or Facebook, the format is people send in mixes, final mixes, rough mixes, masters, and we go through just general feedback on what to improve in the mix. Maybe there's something happening in the room acoustically that is holding us back from getting the best mix possible. You know, general music engineering stuff. So at any time, you can send tracks in to atonuvrecords@gmail.com. That link is in the description. I'm here every night at 6 p.m. Eastern. And yeah, basically, like, subscribe, etc., etc. Share this link around. The more people that send in tracks, the more tracks that we have to dig into, and the more that we all kind of learn and get a good sense of what's going on sonically. So, David, if you are in the chat, just let me know at any time, because I've got tracks from you, and we'll go through those when you get here. So, in the meantime, we are just hanging out while tracks come in. And this is Atonuv Open Studio. People can send in mixes, masters, rough mixes, demos, absolutely anything, or just general questions about audio engineering. I'm here at 6 p.m. Eastern every day. You can send tracks in to my email, which is atonuvrecords@gmail.com. If you are hanging out and want your track looked at, go ahead, just drop a note in the chat and I'll get right to you. I've got 2 tracks from David so far. So David, if you're here, just give me a shout and we'll get into it. But if you are not here, I will hold off for a minute. So send tracks in whenever. and I will get to them. Hey, so this is a ton of Open Studio. I'll be diving into 2 tracks from David in about 3 minutes. I'm going to call it 3 minutes. So taking another 3 minutes, letting people get in here, and then we'll be looking at some submissions. Cool. So let's take a look at a couple of tracks. So David has sent in a revision of Baseline, which I have to peek around my camera to see it. So let's pull up this email. Okay, so we talked about this one before, but now it has a more complete mix. All the components are in the track. You're thinking of it as a temporary mix, looking for pointers and anything in the mix. You've been checking it in mono and you like how it sounds, so I'll go ahead and see what that's sounding like as well. Yeah, so this one has a kick and its fundamental is at 30, and we were talking about how to make that pop in the track. You tried tuning it up and everything just didn't feel right, so you scooped out everybody else below 60, which, that's a solid move. That's what I recommended. It seems to have helped a lot, but you don't have a sub, so it's hard to tell. So I'll go ahead, I'll check that out. Cool. So let's take a listen to this track. Go ahead and let it play. Turn up the volume.
Buried within the sound, like a dream filling the sky while sleep.
Yeah, that's awesome. So a lot of stuff has moved around and changed, and you know, my first gut reaction is the same first gut reaction on the last mix. I mean, this just is really good. It's really exciting. There's that whole middle section is just a never-ending, forever infinity build, and it feels awesome. This is really well put together. This is well composed. That like mid-rangey keyboard line is such a battler. It sounds great. This is a really, really good track. So we talked about clearing up that low end last time, and yeah, I mean, that does it. That's nice and clean. That kick is, poking out of the frequency range, as before, but it's much more contained, and it's not going to swamp your mix when it goes for its final loudness. It's very, very good. Everything is really cleaned out down there, and I could feel the kick this time. So, and I remember on the last mix, I just couldn't feel the kick. There was nice presence on it, but it wasn't felt. Now I can feel it. Mono stuff, like, yeah, we lose like a lot of the air on the risers and the verb and stuff, but we're not losing instruments and we're not losing low end. So if you're cool with it, I say, roll with it. Like I was saying a couple of nights ago, it's becoming increasingly normal for things to just lose entire instruments when we go from stereo to mono. And as to, if that's good or bad, who knows? No judgments. But I can say that it's becoming increasingly standardized. Like Tame Impala just had 2 huge records that lose like lead instruments when you collapse them to mono. So I am not one to fault that. So I think you're cool on that. Your frequency spectrum is really, really nice. This is clean. This track is great. I would go so far, like, if you feel good about this track, let's see. So you haven't given this a proper mix down. I mean, yeah, go through with a fine-tooth comb and see if there's anything like in the world of automation. Like, I'd say that we're in like automation phase because everything feels really nicely laid out. Like, everything has a nice sense of space and the whole thing is laid out. I wonder, have you... Okay, so I'm going to ask on video, and I'm also going to just ask on the chat because that's faster. But have you done any bus processing? I just wonder what your session looks like. You could totally share a screenshot of your session with me, and I'll take a look at it, because now it's kind of like workflow stuff. Like, how do we break through and push this mix to the next level, because you already have a really good mix. And I think that a lot of great final mix decisions come from having a really, really, really clean and established workflow. So I'm going to ask just directly in the chat, is there any way you can send me a screenshot of your session? Because I just want to see what you're already doing before I just start, prescribing a bunch of stuff. But you could get a workflow that kind of dictates your next move, and it's like a healthy way to think. So I'm just going to give you a second to get back to me. Okay, cool. You're sending it. So we'll push into workflow in a second.
This came back from a search.
Oh, my phone sometimes listens to me. So let's give this a second, waiting for an email, and then I'll talk about kind of like some final mix moves. All right, and if you are just joining us and wondering what's going on, this is a ton of open studio where people can send tracks in and get some, mix feedback, mix coaching every night at 6 p.m. Eastern. And right now we're diving into this track and we're kind of figuring out what the next moves to make to take this from what I would say is a very good rough mix. I mean, like we're closing in on like final mix. It sounds very nice. And what are some moves that we can do to push this over the edge to get more, like even more out of this mix? So I am just waiting for a screenshot of this session. And if you are watching and you want to have a track looked at, you can send that in to atonuvrecords@gmail.com at absolutely any time in the day. I like getting stuff ahead of time because then I can kind of plan out the stream a little bit. But you can also send stuff in right now, and that is totally cool. I'm actually I'm pretty stoked to do this because going through just a workflow kind of template thing is really, it's exciting because I think that a clean thought out workflow that moves for you as opposed to against you is a really, really valuable way to think about how to mix, how to make your mix work for you. So before I get this screenshot, like the general philosophy that I have is I'll dial in the, like, first off, I organize a session. That's the very, very first thing. Group, physically group tracks together. This is especially true for when someone sends stems and they're having me mix something. The very first step is to just organize the session, like take the time to put everything together, color code it, like all of that organization stuff is going to save you so much time in the end. And here are these screenshots. So let's see. So here we have everything as as a whole picture. So, and my face is in the way, so let me get rid of my face. So yeah, you've got everything grouped: instruments, drums, other vox. I love this. This is good. This is a nice and organized session. I have nothing to complain about here. This is really nice. Let's see what else is going on. Okay. And I'm not super familiar with FL Studio, so I'm kind of like analyzing this as we go. Okay, cool. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions in the chat, and I kind of see what's going on. Bring my face back. Okay. Okay, so if you can't see the chat or if you're watching on Facebook or whatever, I'm just asking if there are any bus sends happening in here, if we have any buses set up. And I'm going to look up FL Studio bus routing. Okay, so you can do it. That's good. Yeah, it is not the DAW that I am familiar with. Got it. Okay, so there's a bus with groups within it. Good to know. So what I would do, I mean, the overall advice that I have is after we have everything laid out like this, what you want to do is look at what moves you can make on buses, on groups as a whole, rather than don't try to endlessly tweak your snare. See what you can do by working with your drum bus as a whole. Work with your keys as a whole. Work with your auxiliary sweeps and all of that as a whole. And those are the moves that I would make so that you can make subtler moves that are acting on larger portions of the track, because I feel like you have the track dialed in. Like, I think that it has its personality and its vibe and its arrangement. So these final mixing decisions could be, you're going to get more bang for your buck if you're acting on the buses rather than the individual instruments at this point in the mix. And I would go for, if you're just trying to tighten this up and get it a little bit like shinier, brighter, punchier, brighter. I mean, you've already got like plenty of information up top. There is a bit of a drop at like 10K, 12K. So you could shine up the very, very, very top of your track a little bit. That might be cool to look at. And yep, so in the chat, you just said that you haven't done much group processing. So cool, we're in the same mind space here. I think that this is what you should consider looking at. And yeah, I mean, as far as like moves to make, you could do drum compression, do like parallel compression, like really, really bang them up and then blend it in. And then I've talked about it before on the stream, but there's good old rear bus compression. So you basically take your drums and you send them to a parallel compressor and you just crank the heck out of it and make it really, really, really nasty. And then the rest of the track, everything but drums, goes to a parallel compressor that's also really, really beat up. And that can add just overall loudness and perception into your mix. Okay, and you've kind of done processing on individual tracks rather than fitting them in. I mean, this sounds pretty well balanced. Like, so you've done such a good job of picking instruments and picking sounds that it's kind of like the only thing that when I heard the initial mix of this or the initial thing, I was like, yeah, there's the low end isn't defined. But now the low end is defined, and all of the instruments and parts in the mid range, they feel very, very defined because you've picked like very distinct parts. So if you haven't carved space for them yet, I would say you could. Like, if it's already this good, maybe if you make a little more space for each individual part, maybe it'll be even better. But I would also be hesitant because of the good old, like, if it sounds good, it is good thought. And a lot of this already sounds good. A lot of these parts already sound good. So any move that you're going to make them fit with each other, just be on the very conservative side. Like, don't get too cutty on individual tracks. Don't try and force them to interact with each other because you're already in a great place. So as far as a plan of attack, I would say give yourself like a time limit, like a vague, like I'm going to spend a half hour going through individual tracks and maybe carving a little bit of space in the mid range for stuff to be more present or, get cut down. And just, yeah. Okay, so you're feeling like a chaotic mix might be quite cool instead of a really clinical mix. And I absolutely agree because this has so much just power and it has such a sound already that it's, I don't know, you might lose it by making it too clean because it's so forward, it's so exciting, and I would hate for that to disappear from the mix. So, yeah, give yourself like just kind of a set amount of philosophical time to carve out space in the mids, maybe dump some info above 8K, and then move into automation. Just, play around with making some reverbs a little bit longer or shorter here and there. And do like exciting little spicy stuff. Like that's generally my workflow is like, okay, so I'm going to go through and then I'm going to have my effects and then I'm going to automate stuff. Maybe I'm going to take out a little bit of bass in the verse and then bring it back into the chorus, like a little bit, we're talking about like 1 or 2 dB, like just a series of 1 or 2 dB automation moves. We can do them in the EQ. We can do them with volume, reverb sends, just give yourself an hour of automation time. Like I am just going to focus on automating this mix so that it feels like it's alive. And then move into bus processing. Give everyone some parallel compression, do some group reverbs with like a really nice vibey EQ, some sort of analog modeling thing, and just kind of like vibe out the groups and the buses as a whole. And then you're done. I mean, that's it. Like that's the end of the mix. You have finished your mix. The mix is good. So you're like 3 steps away from being done. You might even find that done is not that far from where you are right now. it's very close. So what I want to do to kind of like lead in, because like this mix is almost done. Like this is almost done, and I would love to see what happens with it in its next phase. So, send that in after you get to that. And what I want to do is look at your Billie Eilish remix, because you did a master on it. So you're wondering what's up with mastering. And we can go ahead and we can look at this mastering process that you did on this track, and it will also feed back into how to treat this track. So it's kind of all connected. So let's so this is a Billie Eilish remix, and for stuff like this, I mute the stream so that we don't get a copyright ding, because angry robots. Yeah, so if you're watching and you want to send something in, I don't have anything else on the docket for tonight, so you can send that in to atonuvrecords@gmail.com absolutely anytime. But we're going to go ahead, we're going to sit in silence for the next few minutes, and I'm going to listen to this cover. So, 1 minute, y'all. Okay, really cool. I love hearing this kind of in its final form. We've gone through a few revisions on this, and it sounds really good. Like, it's super clean. It's really interesting. It's dynamic in its arrangement, and we'll get to that later. It has so much going on for it, and so many things are going right in this. It is great. So I want to first off, you sent your chain in the email, so I'm just gonna go over that. Ba, 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 ba. Okay, so an SSL EQ mid-side to mono everything below 150, very cool. EQ to high pass at 30, cool. A Drummer S73, which is a multiband. L2 Ultra Maximizer, and a true peak limiter. So I like a lot of that in your chain. I think the SSL EQ is a solid move. Mid-side EQ, solid move. If you had to crunch things down into mono, feels like a good decision. High pass, good call. The multiband compressor, I would be curious about seeing what would happen if that wasn't a part of the workflow. If it's like if it's a thing that you're super comfortable with and you love it, then like by all means use it. But I will say that within like mastering circles, you would be surprised about how few people actually use a multiband. Multiband compression gets brought up all the time in like forums and on videos, and it becomes this thing where it's like, oh yeah, you got to use a multiband, but generally people are not using them unless there's like a super 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 pressing reason to use it. Like generally speaking, like the heaviest hand that you'll do on a mastering session is like some de-essing. And that goes back to like you would literally have to in the days of vinyl. And so many mastering processes and customs are based in like what was it that you had to do to like master a record for vinyl. Like too many S's, it would make the lathe skip, and then your record would be physically messed up. So, but yeah, like if you're mastering and you hear something and it's just got like a ton of S's and they can't go back to the original session for whatever reason, they lost the files or the mixing engineer doesn't speak to them anymore. In those cases, then you can like pop a de-esser, which is a multi-band compressor, or you could use a multi-band and then set it to catch those S's. Or you'll occasionally use like a dynamic EQ, like an incredibly narrow multi-band, so that you're catching very specific problems. So that's kind of the thing. Like maybe replace. So, I mean, just I'm like totally splitting hairs at this point, but I would tell you like using your approach. I think that your mastering approach is totally like good. Like vibe EQ mid side to specifically address a thing. High pass at 30, and then when we get into this multi-band and then an ultra maximizer, I think that both of those could be replaced with just a compressor. And I think that you will get better results if you replace the multiband and the maximizer with just a compressor. And that's kind of my mastering philosophy, like the fewer tools to get a bigger result. Smaller moves, fewer tools. So I would just go EQ, compression, limiting, like just down to that. And like my personal mastering setup is like analog saturation, because and not every single time also, that's an important thing to note, but I do a lot of stuff where people have been producing it from beginning to end on their computer, a lot of in the box stuff. So I find that if I just run stuff out and then apply like an actual circuit and it hits analog saturation and a transformer, it just gives that last little bit of life and ooey gooey dynamics to a mix that was done just entirely in a laptop. There's nothing wrong with mixing in your laptop. It's actually incredible, but there is that like little bit of soul that comes from it. So I go like analog saturation, EQ, and then a compressor and a limiter. And with that compressor, what I'm looking for, the Ultra Maximizer, is your limiter apart from True Peak. Okay, cool. So that's cool. That makes sense.
Sorry, I don't understand.
What I would look for is like an SSL style compressor. I don't use this all of the time, but for EDM, it's quite nice because what you can do is it's a very, very, very gentle compressor. So I'll go ahead and I'll use baseline. Okay, so what I'm going to look for, super low ratio, the lowest it can go, and setting the threshold so that we're barely getting any gain reduction. So it's like the threshold is all the way up. And then the SSL compressor and many stereo compressors have a sidechain filter. So you can just open this up to like 100. And then we get the like multi-band action of not touching the low end so that we can have like a nice full kick without getting any extra compression on the low end because we want it to remain dynamic. And that's what's really important, is keeping that low end dynamic so that we're not just crushing that low end into a brick and then killing our dynamic range on the entire mix. So I'm gonna filter out the lows on this, and then I'm just barely touching it. And then I have a limiter at the end set to -0.1, and then I'm gonna crank the makeup gain to get the volume. Because like a lot of these compressors and these analog style compressors, their algorithm is written in a way that like it sounds good to turn this volume up. Like it is nice and it's built for it, and it gives it like some life and some vibe and some crunch, and they're just built to get turned up. And that's how I'm gonna get the loudness combined with my final limiter. Cool. So like an SSL type compressor is really, it's particularly good for EDM. There are other ones that are good as well. Like compressors are good, whatever. And that's how I would, okay, so I'll write that down. So that's the UAD SSLG. Waves does G type as well. Yeah, so and that would be my Okay, so so the SSLG type, that's kind of what I would lean towards being the answer for the situation, but there's tons of like mastering grade compressors, like the Very Mu, and like I personally really like the API 2500, but that's like a rock compressor for sure. And it's kind of like mid-rangey, and it pushes those, and it has that, and yeah, that's like my go-to indie rock compressor. uh I just like how it sounds. So, but it's very much so personal preference. I just wouldn't use like an 1176 or an LA2A or anything like that, though I'm certain that people have done it. So, but all in all, it's that workflow and mindset. Like that final mastering compressor absolutely shouldn't get smashed with a bunch of gain reduction. You want to get like 1 to 2 dB at the loudest part of the track, and then um push it into your limiter to achieve final loudness. And that is going to be just a super clean and crispy way to push your mix. So, going back to this remix, it's too pushed. It's it's really before the first chorus, you're perfect. But then that chorus drops and the dynamic range gets squashed to bits, and it's too squashed, and yeah, your dynamic range goes down to like DR3, and RMS is hitting like -5. Too squashed. So all of those things that I was just saying would be ways to remedy that. Like, I think that there's probably too much compression happening in the low end. So a compressor where you can, take the low end out of the equation and watch out for that. And then, basically you're pushing loudness a little too aggressively. So there are tools like the Matte DR2. I think it is particularly good, but anything that'll let you see your RMS and ideally your dynamic range. I don't know if there's anything outside of the Matte that gives you a nice readout like that. But yeah, -9 to -8 RMS. Super, super, super safe. And that's going to play well on streaming services. It's going to be good on YouTube, and it's also going to be good live and in a club. Like, absolutely guarantee it. Everyone's speakers will be like, yes, yay, it's very good and loud. The sound engineers are going to go like, yes, good and loud, and you're going to be the same volume as everyone else in the club. Keep it around here, unless. And, for like a club mix, if you happen to have your own sound system that you take with you everywhere and you don't mind replacing your speakers all the time, yeah, absolutely, you could push your RMS to -5. But I recommend against it. So, yeah, if you just backed everything off, like basically, I don't know what your metering situation is like, et cetera, but up to the first chorus, that should be your maximum loudness for the entire, like at the loudest, it should be as loud as that pre-chorus. So it's just nailed right there, and and so that's the other thing. Besides just like the standards and the streaming loudness penalties and all of this like nerdy stuff, it sounded really, 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 really good before the first chorus. It was like creamy and dialed in, and it felt really good, and it sounded really good. And then that first chorus dropped, and I could hear it get crunched up, and the bass, it stopped being like that nice creamy bass because your low end was just crunching into your dynamic range, and then it was becoming a little bit claustrophobic, overwhelming, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, and that's like normal. That's like really normal. Like you pushed it a little too hard. Everyone does it. But what was great, the great takeaway is that first verse, killer. Absolutely what you would want it to be. So that's, that's my takeaway on that. Cool. So if you are watching, this is a ton of open studio. You can send in mixes, final mixes, masters, absolutely anything. And I'll take a look at it, see what's going on in your mix, see what's going on in your master, talk about a bunch of stuff. And you can send tracks in to atonuvrecords@gmail.com at absolutely any time of the day. David just sent in a couple of tracks. We've gone through those, so we are out of material for the day. So if you've got something, feel free to send it in right now, and I'll take a look at it. If not, we'll just kind of hang out for the next little bit. And if you have any audio questions, feel free to ask. And definitely, I will say, share this link, share this stream. I'm here at 6 p.m. Eastern every day. And the more tracks that we have to look at, the more that we all get to learn about cool audio stuff. So, share the love, spread the love, etc., etc. And speaking of spreading the love, I will use this as an opportunity to do the daily Patreon shout out. And let me put up the ticker. We've got Demeter and Mason supporting the stream. They are awesome. You can check that out. And, there's the shout out. And then like one-on-one mix consultations and lessons are available and stuff like that. So thanks, y'all. Y'all are awesome. And now I will put up the call for tracks. So if anyone has any questions or any tracks, you can send them in now. I'll hang out for the next half hour and see if anything comes in. And I'll be back tomorrow. Tomorrow, I'm going to start it at 6:30 because I have a meeting right beforehand and I want to take a minute. So tomorrow is 6:30 instead of 6, and then we're back to 6 for the indefinite future. All right, let's put on some background tunes. Okay, cool. So, just got asked plugins that model hardware. Yeah, you'd call them like analog modeled plugins or analog modeling plugins. Do different companies' models sound noticeably different from one another? To a degree, yes. Like, I wouldn't say that it's like, there's no hard and fast, like, oh yeah, this one sounds better than the other one. They do sound different. Like, if you A-B'd them, they are different. If you did a null test, which is the most scientific way to see if something is different, where you, if you take two pieces of audio and you flip the phase on one of them and then play them at the same time, if no sound comes out, that means they are identical. So if you took an 1176 from UAD and an 1176 from Waves and set them to the same exact setting and then printed those tracks, the if you played them with the phase flipped, then sound would come out. They would be different. So they are definitely different. Okay? Now, as far as definitely better or is this one worse? Is this one better? Nah, like they're just different. Like everything is a little bit different. I wouldn't say that there's any official modeled plugin. There had to be a degree of quality control from the original company, like SSL or Teletronics or any of them. They had to give their permission. And yeah, those official plugins, they're all good. I wouldn't say that there's any problem with any of them. I personally use, I don't know, if we want to get into just like what I use, we have time to kill. I hate doing just gear talk because it's bordering on useless, but there aren't any tracks in the queue. So sure. So I have the I use the Slate stuff because it's nice and I like it. I like the Infinity EQ because the layout is really nice. And that's so superficial, but basically I like how it's laid out and it looks really big, and that's really helpful with a parametric EQ. So sure, that's what I use. And it has some nice mid-side processing on it, and it's cool. I like that. The Fab filter limiter is good, and I use that as my final limiter because it's a true peak limiter and it's like relatively affordable. So that's good. And and it oversamples. So good on that. Then, as far as like fun stuff, the Kush audio plugins are all really, 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 really good. They oversample, and as far as plugins with vibe, you really can't get better than that. The Clariphonic plugin is invaluable. It sounds amazing for top end. I have a hardware Clariphonic. The plugin is also like just as good. I just have the hardware because it can plug in to all of my stuff. Yeah, the Clariphonic is great. The AR1 is a really, really nice vibey compressor. I use it on bass quite a lot. It's kind of a Fairchild type compressor. But yeah, like bass, when I need to kind of give some character to the bass, the AR1 is really good. I also throw it on buses a lot of the time. Like if I'm doing a rock mix that needs to sound pretty forward and, classic analog vibe, I'll throw the AR1 across every bus and then have that be my bus compressor for that session. Like more often than not, that's a good choice. They've got the Electra EQ, which is a really, really nice, kind of like API style variable Q. So the more you cut or boost, the narrower the Q gets. And it's a very musical way of doing EQ. The gold plate is a fantastic reverb. The UBK is also a really good kind of like compression saturation channel strip. So on and so forth. They have these like Neve and API transformer things so you can use to get like a really nice saturation digitally. That's super cool. So the Kush plugins are really good. And then let's see, then it's all kind of boring. The Softtube Console 1, I use that for workflow, especially if I have to do a mix really quick. I can throw the Console 1 across the entire mix, and then I have a physical piece of hardware that I can use to control the plugins, and I can dial in a mix quickly with that. And then those are modeled. There's SSL model, the API model, which I use 80% of the time, and then there's a Neve model as well, which I will also use on occasion. Sound toys for effects, because that's what everyone does, and it's a good choice. Yeah, and then it's the Universal Audio. I have a PCI card, and I quite like how the Universal Audio plugins sound. That isn't, as far as the modeling plugins, that is my personal preference. Everyone else has personal preferences. The Plugin Alliance has a lot of the same plugins, and they're based off of the same models, and the algorithms are incredibly close. So if there's a UAD version of something and also a Plugin Alliance version, you can get the Plugin Alliance for considerably cheaper. So that's cool. The reason that I like the UAD stuff is because it's the processing takes place on like a separate card, so I can have a really heavy session, and if I'm doing all of my EQs and compression moves with my UAD stuff, then I'm not eating up CPU with like kind of basic functions. So then I have a wide open computer for automating delays and stuff. So that's why it's my personal preference. More so like workflow and saving that CPU over like sonic quality. Yeah, and then I have like the Mercury package of waves, which is just a ton of stuff. And those, like the wave stuff is like perfectly good. It's pretty lightweight on the CPU, and it's not very expensive as an investment. And also like a lot of people have the waves plugins. So if I'm mixing something that someone has sent me and they're sending me a session, there is a very good chance that they have already used Waves plugins, and so then I have them, and then I can look at what they've already done, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's kind of like an industry move to have the Waves package. So yeah, that's gear talk. That's plugin talk. They're all good, and yeah, and then the 1176, there are loads of different versions, if they're based on the same thing. Yeah, so in short, yeah, there's not a giant, huge gulf of difference between the variety of 1176s that are out there. I mean, from manufacturer to manufacturer, from Waves to UAD to Plugin Alliance, et cetera, et cetera. That said, there are different generations of the 1176, there's the black face, the silver face, the bluey, which is like the CLA 1176. Those you would have to like look at what the differences are between those generations of hardware to see where the plugin works, because those are like different. They have like different distortion ratios, and they have different knees on the compression and all that. So you would want to see what the difference between the black face, the silver face, and the bluey are when you're making the decision of what to use. / also put them all on and audition them and see which one you like the most. But yes, in summary, not a huge difference. So we are hanging out at Atonuv Open Studio. This is episode 8.5 because yesterday my internet decided not to work at all. So I'm not calling this 9 because that would be a lie. So here we are, 8.5. If you are working on some music and you've got a mix or a master or a rough mix or a demo, absolutely anything, you can send that to atonuvrecords@gmail.com. That link is in the description. And you can send it at absolutely any time during the day. You can also feel free to send it literally right now if you feel like it. And you can send it in. We'll take a look at a track, talk over it. Open resource. I'm here every day at 6 p.m. Eastern time. With the exception of tomorrow, I have a meeting, so I will be starting at 6:30 instead of 6. So small difference there. And we've got a question in the chat. Working on a song, feel stuck. So I'm going to talk on the chat. Cool. So I'm going to take a look at a early version of a track to see if there's anything that comes to mind of what to add to it to finish it up. So that'll be coming in a moment. Okay, so we've got from Scarholm again, who's been sending in really great stuff. A couple of demos that I'm going to load up, and I just want to make sure. And just so everyone knows, if you're sending in a demo, gotcha. Okay, cool. So I am going to play it, but make sure to tap the microphone and make some sound in the microphone just to protect the demo. So, yeah. Okay, so let's take a look at this track. Tap, 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 tap.
Vågorna sjunger, månen är där. Jag ser igenom vår atmosfär. Och solen strålar i mig. In i benet och lägger sig. För det finns ljus för en annan. Vi går tillsammans. Vi går ju samma väg. Ta oss till himlen, tillbaka i minnet. Ja. Ge oss ett jävla rymdskepp. Vi skulle ju tuta. Vi skulle ju tuta. Vi vann i vår ruta och lägga en skuta. Vi skulle ju så känner jag.
Tap, tap.
Så känner jag. Så tänker jag. Vi går tillbaka för länge sen. Cirkulerar och möts igen. Och tar i hand med mina ord. Där på lågornas små jord. För det finns ljus för en annan. Vi går tillsammans. Vi går ju samma väg. Ta oss till himlen, tillbaka i sinnet. Ja. Jag säger staten var det vårt rymdskepp. Vi skulle ju tuta. Vi skulle ju tuta. Vi vann i vår ruta och lägga en skuta. Vi skulle ju så känner jag.
That's good.
Så känner jag. Så känner jag. Så känner jag.
Okay, that's another really cool track. And I during it, I was like, oh, that's really good. At the end there, what I was starting to feel like is that there wasn't enough new information being brought into the mix. And then that little plucky synth happened, and I was like, oh, yeah, this is exactly what the track needs. Like, there needs to be more new information being brought in as sections change into new sections. So you're on the right path, I think. There could just probably be generally more of that. Little things coming in to differentiate sections, and carve out their own space. That's a thing to look at. And like that line that happens at the end there. Bum, 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 bum. You could have more instruments join it. It kind of starts to happen. And like, I was thinking that I was like, oh, maybe more stuff should join in on this line. And then it would happen. So, we're very much so in the same mind space, but I would maybe play with that theme even more and develop it even more. I would lean into it harder and do more with it. Bum, 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 bum.
Vågorna sjunger, månen är där, säg. För det finns ju oss ett jävla rymdskepp, vi skulle ju tuta.
Okay, so like you're hinting at the theme right there. Maybe lean into it harder. Make it a harder hook.
Ge oss ett jävla rymdskepp, vi skulle ju tuta, vi skulle ju tuta. Vi vann i vår ruta.
Okay, and then there it is again. So it can maybe develop into a bigger theme earlier on in the piece and then get absolutely bigger in the second half. Like maybe this level of development should happen a little bit sooner, and then it's even bigger in the next section. That's like an immediate thought that comes to mind, is like make the hooks even bigger. And play around with that sound too. Maybe like a warmer, organic synth tone to kind of like brighten it up. You sent that that reference track the other day, and that had like a ton of like saturated, like analog sounding synths in it. And maybe that's a texture to play with on that hook. It could yield a really cool result. Let's see. I mean, that's such a great bass line and such a great feel on all of this. Like, this feels really good. This is another really solid track. And yeah, it's, the ending's not done, and that's fine. You can just throw it into a reverb, fade it out, like whatever. It's the ending. I am wondering also, like mix-wise, this is looking a little bit better than the first few that I was looking at. The vocals are a bit hot, and they're a bit hot specifically from 500 to 1.5K. If that got brought down, you would actually have a really, really flat mix. Like you've got plenty of info above 2K this time around. So if you could dial back between 500 and 1.5, it'll clean up a little bit and feel a little bit more hi-fi and wide. And that could be as simple as just pulling the vocals back a little bit. Like pull them back, give them a nice wide reverb and some nice sense of space. Yeah, that's how I feel about it. Like develop it faster. I think that like from an outside perspective, I thought that it started getting really, really good here, which is almost at the end of the song. So I wouldn't withhold gratification from the audience, especially now, because, it's all on Spotify. People like, there's an article where it's like, people spend an average of like 3 seconds with a song and they decide if they like it or not. It's something horrifying like that. So you gotta just grab people super fast, like from the very, very beginning of your piece. So with that spirit in mind, like never withhold gratification, which maybe isn't the best for like the art of songwriting, but it also we can't just go like, oh no, it's horrible. It also means that it forces us to come up with more ideas faster. And if we have to have a killer hook in the first 30 seconds of a track, well, that means that we have to develop it even further and make it amazing in the last minute. So we have to play our cards faster, but it also means that we have to build a more complex beast as the song progresses. So it's like a win-lose, win-win scenario. Yeah, those are my thoughts on it, and I really want to see what happens with this song because it is another really cool one. And you sent another track. I'm gonna go ahead and you were wondering there's like some ideas that can maybe get blended between the two. So let me go ahead and get this one playing. Oh, and then David sent another track. So we'll take a look at that after this. Very cool. All right. Radio International. Let's take a listen. Tap, tap, tap.
Vågorna sjunger, månen är där. Jag ser igenom vår atmosfär.
Okay,
Och
interesting.
solen strålar i mig. In i benet och lägger sig. För det finns ljus för en annan. Vi går tillsammans. Vi går ju samma väg. Ta oss till himlen, tillbaka i minnet. Ja.
I love this guitar.
Ge oss ett jävla rymdskepp. Vi skulle ju tuta. Vi skulle ju tuta. Vi vann i vår ruta och lägga en skuta. Vi skulle ju tuta.
Yeah, this is good. Yeah, this has, we're building, we're getting more going on.
Vi går tillbaka för länge sen. Cirkulerar och möts igen. Och tar i hand med mina ord. Där på lågorna små jord. För det finns ljus för en annan. Vi går tillsammans. Vi går ju samma väg. Ta oss till himlen, tillbaka i sinnet. Ja. Jag säger staten var det vårt rymdskepp. Vi skulle ju tuta. Vi skulle ju tuta. Vi vann i vår ruta och lägga en skuta. Vi skulle ju tuta. Så känner jag. Så känner jag. Så känner jag. Så känner jag.
Okay, so that is doing like exactly what I was just saying in that other one. That isn't delaying gratification. Like from the very, very moment that this starts, this guitar part with its with the flange and the filter opening, like This feels super good. We're rising. And then it absolutely hits. And then the bass drops, and it's really good. Like, this version is doing a lot, and it sound like I love that guitar part. I love the feel, and it has such a broad appeal. Like that, this is like, oh yeah, this is like radio-friendly hit territory, and I would lean into that. So what's very interesting is that these, like you were saying, there's some stuff that the one has that the other doesn't. So like this one has like that big driving dance feel, and you know, people like that. I like that. David likes it. Like, we all like it. It's got that feel. It has that great texture in the guitar, and it has this really, really good sense of space and build and drama, and it has all of it in it. What I think it doesn't have is this development of the musical theme. That it doesn't have the hook. You got to take this hook and bring it into this one. And that's what's missing. Like, we're not developing the hook. You've got that really, really cool guitar part, and you're playing the line, but the hook isn't getting developed. If you dropped this stuff, if you drop that pluck, and maybe I would even maybe take this into super saw territory. If you did that with, I mean, it's maybe too much, but like that plucky thing, very cool. You could drop that in over the guitar and have it develop that theme and hit that hook. It would, like, in the context of that piece, blow people's minds. You could maybe take out the good old super saw and put in like a big rave line, wop, 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 and do that. And, you know, it's maybe pushing into cheesy territory, but it also just might like make it a hit. So I don't know, go for that. Yeah, develop that theme. Basically, if there was a choice between the two, like if you're going to do one version, I would Radio Internationale is a hit, and I would lean into that. I would take the hooks and the lines from the first version and drop them into this. If you want to do both versions, I would incorporate some of that guitar stuff into the original version, because I think that the guitar is too dry. Like, in contrast, it could still be folky and like gentler, and it doesn't have to go into the dance vibe, but that guitar needs some vibe because it's carrying so much of the weight of the piece. Just having that guitar have some feel and some soul in it, that's what's really making the Radio Internationale the stronger version. Yeah, those are my thoughts on it. I want you to just run with this because it sounds excellent. And I mean, I think that this one right here is just a straight up hit. And just realized I've got my thing covering the tracks. Okay, so Radio Internationale right here. This is a big winner. They're both great. I love the song. I love the roots of it. And yeah, hook from here, bring it over here. Guitar from here, bring it over here. Great track. Thank you for sharing. I love listening to your stuff. And also, great job just on these rough mixes. You've got info above 2K now. Not as scooped, and it just sounds so much bigger, and it sounds so much more present. It sounds more forward in my room. It's so much better just over these last couple of days. Couple little bits of difference are making a huge improvement. All right, so David sent a really short track. Came up with on the piano, added a few things here and there. He thought it was cool. Let's see what it sounds like. All right, and if you're watching, this is a Ton of Open Studio. You can send in tracks to atonuvrecords@gmail.com. I am here at 6 p.m. Eastern every day, with the exception of tomorrow. I will be starting at 6:30. I have a meeting beforehand, so gotta push it a little bit. So tomorrow at 6:30, you can send stuff at any time. I'll take a look at it. We'll dive into the mix. We'll see if there's something cool in the arrangement that you can do. Absolutely anything. So, dropping in David's track. It's a sparse, short one. Let's just see what's happening here. Cool. It's really cool to see your process because the stuff that you've sent, the bass line and the Billie Eilish, like these are so huge and expansive and like big sound, and it's cool to see it broken down into just the bare bones like this, and you know, killer, uh, composition. It's very good, and yeah, I want to see where you take this, because yeah, like you're saying in the chat, DreamWorks, WB Entertainment, I feel like, all of this, if you padded out this first little bit, and who knows where this is going to go, but this right here, if that feel stretched out for a little bit, that's like the opening to a movie right there. Like that's easy. It's exactly what it would call for. Right there, that's really nice. So, like, that's one way that this could go. If that was just padded out and then kept at that, like, gentle feel, that's the intro to, a movie, or, like, the little incidental music throughout a scene. And then, I could also see, like, this getting fleshed out into a full-on banger, for sure. If you voice that out with bass and drums and everything, this could, that could totally work into a larger idea. So I mean, I don't want to like jump the gun and tell you what to do, because this is obviously, you just did this in the last 2 hours while you were hanging out. So I would love to see where this goes, but it seems like there's, at the very least, 2 super solid ideas going on. Also, not gonna lie, I am a sucker for things like this at the beginning. Like, oh, what's happening? The sounds and the field recording in the back, and the piano starts playing. That's just nice stuff. Cool. So, I might get on you every now and then to finish this. Oh, sweet. We have a new submission from Ben. Cool. So Ben is I haven't heard anything from them, so totally new. Welcome to the stream. Happy to have you here. Let me download your track real quick. All right, let's take a listen. Totally beautiful. So that is just, I love music like this. Like, this is kind of my, I don't know. This is what I like to listen to for like my day to day. Love this. I mean, I love all music, and I listen to, I mean, like, I'll be mixing a metal record in the morning and then some folk in the afternoon. Like, I love it all. But this is just, I love songs like this. So, as such, when something like this happens, I just go like, oh, nice song. And then I don't really worry too much about like, well, what's the mix like? You know? So let's dive into the mix because we've already got a great song, and that's what matters. First things first, something is a little bit clippy. And if it is, I know you're prepping this for release, it might be that it clipped the mic. It could be that you got some clipping on your interface. But there's some clipping to find and see if you can address. The best way to fix clipping is to not clip in the first place. So if this is coming from a plugin, if you have like a vinylizer or some sort of saturation plugin, I think you're driving it a little bit too hard. If you don't, then we have clipping on the recording itself. And there's not a lot you can do, but you could see about like isotope declip will get you a little bit cleaner. You could use it just a little bit, and you can get a free trial of isotope RX for 30 days. And I would consider putting it on if you have clipping and you don't want to re-record. Like, I understand not wanting to re-record, but it is bordering on like taking you out of the song. So I would address it. And then mix-wise, you're a bit scoopy from 1.5K to 4K. And I would address that. Because that's going to take out some of the presence and the forwardness and the soul. It's going to be hard to get that info because you've got voice and guitar. I understand why it's scooped, but I would dial some vibe back into that region because it will if you can get it, if you can get more from 2K to 4K, it is going to really, really help this mix. That's like my mix advice on this whole thing. So other than those two things, I think you've got a killer track. See if you can take care of this clipping and see if you can dial in 1.5 to 4K. You're also at like 12K on up. It's basically just filtered off, but I would say that it's like probably genre appropriate. You've got that lo-fi vibe going. So yeah, I understand why it's filtered there. See about maybe making it a little bit less extreme. Just like a little. It's like a pretty steep cut right there. I'm not even saying do it. I'm saying give it a try. See what happens if you bring back some info above 12K. Just a little bit. And yeah, if it kills the vibe, absolutely don't. You just run the risk of, like, in a playlist situation, it'll sound like underwater compared to other stuff. But if you're in a lo-fi playlist, then maybe it'll just fit in with everybody else. So not a deal breaker. So Ben, thank you for sending this track. I really love it. Thank you for, joining the stream and sending something in. It is so cool whenever people send stuff in. So thank you. And yeah, those two things. Look at them in the mix. All right. So this is a ton of open studio. Folks can join every night at 6 p.m. Eastern. You can send tracks whenever. I'm happy to take a listen and a look at them. And I'm here every day at 6, except for tomorrow. Gonna start at 6:30, just so everyone knows. 6:30 tomorrow. Send tracks whenever. Like, comment, and subscribe. All of the regular YouTube stuff. And people have been sharing this stream like around Reddit and stuff, and I super appreciate it. That has been getting people in here. I would say keep sharing because we're only on episode 8. And the more people that get in on this, the more stuff that everyone gets to listen to and take a look at. And yeah, basically, the more content, the better. So I really appreciate all the sharing that's already happened. Please continue to share. And I will see everybody tomorrow. Thank you for joining. Let's call that good for tonight.